Hi everyone, I'm Bryony.
And I'm Ralph.
And this is Finn. We are field officers with Amphibian and Reptile Conservation Trust. Welcome to East Weaversdown. We are going to give you a site visit today and answer any questions you may have along our way. If you do have a question, please type it in the comments box and we'll do our best to answer it for you. Okay, so I think we're good to go. Bear with us and we will begin our walk.
Hi there.
Hi. Come on.
So as we move through the beginning of the site, this is more woodland edge than heathland. You've got sort of secondary birch and oak woodland through here. But as we start going further onto the site, it opens out a bit more. So here we are in the wood edge. We've still got some nice mature oak trees there. And plenty of bracken, which is less desirable. You can start to see the heathland species coming in, so there's bits of gorse growing in the sides here, lots of scrubby gorse bushes, plenty of Molinia, purple moorgrass growing up as well. It's another typical species of heathland sites. Areas like this along the footpaths often get enriched because of dog mess, so you tend to find a lot more vegetation growing along there and more vigorous plants like the bramble here and gorses and nettles. But now as we round this bend you can see we're coming out onto what looks more like a proper heathland. We've got heather coming in, we've got sandy banks on the side here, we've still got the trees on the edge. But this is starting to look a lot more like what you'd expect of a heathland. Here's an area that's getting quite overgrown, so this will be in the management plan to get cleared over the next few seasons to open it all up again and allow all the heathland specialist species to flourish. At the moment it's getting a bit too shady. On this corner here we can see another nice heathland indicator species. It's going over a bit now, it's not quite so vibrant as it once was, but this is bilberry. So a month or so ago this would have been covered with little bright dark blue berries. You can just see a few of them still growing on there. And that's the wild version of the blueberry. Again, another good heathland species. Here you can see a little area where we've cleared some of the gorse back. We're talking about controlling that scrub. That's an area that's been cleared. Starting to come back.
For those who have just joined us, I'm Bryony.
And I'm Ralph.
And this is our tour of East Weaversdown, an ARC managed site in East Hampshire.
So we're just coming up now. On our left you can see the open heath. In the far distance you might just be able to pick out an area of sort of greyish brown just in the back right corner there. That's an area of bracken that's been sprayed. So bracken can be quite a problem on sites like this. It can be invasive and outcompete other species. So there's an area that was treated last year and will hopefully soon revert back to heathland. If we just go down this path here, we've got one of the tins that we use to survey for reptiles. And we can just have a look and see if we can find anything under it. It's a bit late in the season now, so odds aren't quite as good as, say, sort of April, May time. Let's just see if there's anything at home. A lot of wood ants. So that's quite common for reptile refugia like this on heathland sites. Wood ants, lots of the red ants, love them as nest making sites because they get nice and warm and they're really good for building their nest under. And unfortunately reptiles don't tend to enjoy them so much when they've got a horde of ants underneath, so you don't tend to find reptiles under tins that have ants under. But whilst we're here, turn that around. Oops. Let's have a look at some of the species that we might have found there. So in the UK we have 6 species of reptile. There are 3 lizards and 3 snakes. And Bryony's going to talk you through some of the lizard species that we might potentially find on a site like this.
Okay, so the most commonest reptile you may find on a site is the common lizard. They're quite small and they're kind of a brownish, greenish colour normally, and they're much smaller than the sand lizard, so that's one way to tell between the two. They eat mainly invertebrates. They give birth to live young, so they're called viviparous lizards. And compared to the sand lizards, which lay eggs, the sand lizards need open sandy areas in which to lay their eggs, and this is one thing we do manage for on heathland sites. So sand lizards, this is a female sand lizard, they have an amazing pattern down the side of their body, these eye spots, and the males have it too, but in the springtime they go green. So you can easily tell the difference between male and female sand lizards in the spring and summer, because the males go that lovely green colour. The third lizard you may find on heathland is the slowworm. So this is a lizard. It may look a little bit like a snake, but it is just a lizard without legs. And another thing that distinguishes it from snakes is they have eyelids, so they can blink. Most lizards can blink, whereas snakes cannot. So they're the 3 lizards that you find on heathlands, and now Ralph is going to talk to you about the snakes we may find.
Hello everyone. So yeah, just like the lizards, there's only 3 species in the UK. It's not that hard to keep track of them. The most widespread, is the grass snake. So you want to turn around actually, this way. It's not getting enough light otherwise. Still no light.
You can come a bit closer.
I'm just trying to get the picture to show. That's a bit better. Okay, so grass snake is the largest snake we have in the UK. It can grow up to about 6 feet long. It's got a very distinctive yellow collar at the back of its head here, and round pupils, which distinguish it from viper species. Like the adder. The adder is our only venomous snake. It has those vertical slitted eyelids, which mark it out as a viper, and a very distinctive zigzagging diamond pattern down the back. This one's just a juvenile. It's quite a small one, but it's got typical female coloration, so much browner scales. Males tend to be higher contrast, they'll have a blacker stripe pattern and greyer sides. Adders come in a lot of different colour morphs. So you can see there's one of the males we were talking about. Just about to. It's just overexposing. With the typical silver and black patterning, but you can also get melanistic, fully melanistic animals with dark black all through. There's a couple of females there. Then the final snake species we have in this country is the smooth snake. We've got one of these here, just about exposing. They have a distinctive butterfly-shaped marking on the back of their head, which is unique to every individual animal. So it's a way that we can monitor the exact animals we have on site. This is the UK's rarest reptile. It's restricted to heathland sites like East Weavers Down. There aren't any actually on this site, but sites like this in the southeast and southwest are the only places that you can find this rare reptile. So those are the UK species. Let's carry on our walk and see if we've got any questions coming in at the same time.
So one way for monitoring reptiles on the site we have is by doing a tin transect. You just saw Ralph turn over a tin there. So most of our sites have a transect of tins, which is maybe up to 20, 30 tins dotted around the site. And on a monthly basis, we will visit each site and turn over the tins and see what we find. And by doing this, we get a rough idea of the population of each animal on the sites that we manage. So Rory wants to know where we are. So this is East Weavers Down. It's an ARC site in East Hampshire. We don't own it, it's privately owned, but we do all the management work here. And this site is home to 5 of our native reptile species. The only one that isn't here is the smooth snake.
So East Weavers Down, yeah, it's just outside Liphook in terms of where it is. So it's on the very edge of the South Downs National Park. It does just creep inside.
Darren wants to know how often we find snakes under our tins.
So it varies. The peak survey time is in sort of spring, so March through to May. That's when you'd expect to find most. We have all snake species on our site, on most of our sites, but the most common is probably the adder. Grass snakes tend to prefer slightly wetter sites, and as most of our sites are dry lowland heath, they don't have quite such good habitat for grass snakes, but we do find them all on our sites. Okay, any other questions?
Yep, what do sand lizards eat?
Do you want to know? So sand lizards, like most lizards in the UK, really, they feed on invertebrates. So in particular, things like moth larvae and spiders, flies, things like that. So yeah, it's invertebrate prey. Though in some cases they can be cannibalistic. They do sometimes eat their own young. So that's an extra source of food when times are hard.
What is the most you've ever seen under one tin?
It's a good question. You can both answer this probably. So I think most I've ever seen, I had 5 smooth snakes under one tin.
I was going to say that one too.
Okay, I stole that one. So, do you have another one? No.
Not under one tin, but there is a site that we have. There's about 6 or 7 tins, and we saw about 30 slow worms under those tins put together. So that was very impressive.
Quite often you'll find when slow worms have just been born, they stay quite close together, so you can get easily sort of 20 or so juveniles all in one little ball, staying together. Okay. So this feature that we're walking along at the moment is not naturally occurring, it's a sort of man-made structure. This is what we call a sand trace, so it looks functionally like a path, and in many cases they're treated as such, but the idea behind this is that it's a habitat for sand lizards to lay their eggs in. So if you see, we've got a flat bit there that looks like the path, and then above it we've got a bank, and that's where all the spoil that's been dug out from the path bit has been piled, and that just gives a nice varied topography for lizards to burrow in and lay their eggs. That's an important part of their habitat requirements. So on sites that don't have enough naturally occurring sand, we tend to dig over sand traces like this just to provide it for them. Should we head back on? Okay. Have you got any other questions?
Yeah. Do you only find sand lizards on heathland sites? Is a question we've had. So in the UK, you find sand lizards on heathlands and also dunes. So coastal dune systems, you also find them. Both sites, both habitat types, have the open sandy soils that the sand lizards need to lay their eggs. And also, the sand heats up very quickly, so it generates a lot of heat that the lizards need to bask. Further south into Europe, you find sand lizards on a lot more habitat types. Because the weather is warmer, they don't need to go on specifically heathland sites.
Got a question about issues around the park. So as an organisation, ARC, we don't manage that many sites within the park itself. It's only really about 3, which are Broxhead, Woolmer Ranges, and here on East Weavers Down. but more broadly speaking, the issues for reptiles are going to be fairly similar, and that's things like antisocial behaviour. Really, it's human disturbance. So if there's excessive dogs walking off leads, so you'll notice our exemplary field dog here is trotting along very well behaved for once. So dogs causing disturbance by going through the heath, people directly disturbing animals by walking through the heath as well. That can be a big impact on their breeding success. Heathland fires can be of great risk, and again, those are largely a result of human activity. So in terms of issues for reptiles, I'd say it's things like that, disturbance and threats to the habitat.
It's not a question, but one of our viewers has just sent a comment in saying she found 2 adders under a tin once, and she waited very calmly for them to move away so she could put the tin down gently, but instead a 3rd adder came to join, so she had a very privileged view of 3 adders under one tin. Another question come in.
That's so Mr. Guy Mason, the Guy Mason, is asking us about Longmoor. So Guy and us, we used to work together when Guy was with Hampton Island White Wildlife Trust to manage one of these MOD sites within the park, Walmer Ranges or Longmoor. So Guy's cattle regularly came roaming over onto our side of the site to do a bit of munching. And we'd occasionally do a bit of scrub clearance on his site potentially. But yeah, it's doing well. Walmer's had a bumper year for natterjacks this year. Really good spawning. So Walmer is one of the only, well, it is the only indigenous heathland, so inland natterjack site in the country. Everywhere else where they've been reintroduced to have come from that original Walmer population. And they had a really good breeding year this year, so that's excellent news for natterjacks. If you want to volunteer, we have restarted our volunteering activities. So we put them on hold temporarily over lockdown, but we started again. So we've got certain control measures in place, but anyone interested in volunteering, doing a bit of practical habitat management work to help reptiles, can get in touch with me directly. So that's ralph.connolly@arc-trust.org, arc-trust.org. But all the information's on the website as well.
We've had another question come in. What eats reptiles? So the main predator of reptiles is birds, really. Birds of prey and corvids. They will eat a lot of the small reptiles and even snakes. You quite often see a buzzard flying over with a snake between its talons. That's unusual. Another thing that will eat reptiles are reptiles themselves. So smooth snakes are avid predators of other reptiles. They are the UK's only constrictor snake, and they prefer to eat other lizards, so sand lizards, slow worms and common lizards. Reptiles themselves, they generally eat small invertebrates, or the larger snakes will also eat small mammals as well. There's another question. You can take this one, Ralph. What to do if you see an adder? If you see an adder in your path?
Count yourself lucky, I would say. Adders are declining across the UK. They used to be thought of as one of the more widespread species, but they've suffered quite a considerable decline over the last 50-60 years. So the chance to see an adder in the wild is a rare thing, and it's one that you should be grateful for, really. There's a lot of bad press about adders, but they're not aggressive snakes. They are venomous. They can be, it can be a serious bite if you do get bitten, but adders only tend to bite when they're threatened. So often when people are trying to pick them up or take photos very close to them. So I would say if you see an adder, don't be worried and don't get too close to try and take a picture or something, but just appreciate the chance to see such a sort of iconic heathland species. That's a very good question there from Veronica. Pheasant releases can have a very big impact on reptile populations. So when pheasants are released prior to a shoot, they're obviously they're voracious predators, and they eat a lot of small vertebrate prey, things like small mammals, definitely lizards, slow worms. So I'm sure, I don't know how many studies have been done, but I'm sure there is a correlation between pheasant releases and reptile mortality. They are directly predated by birds like pheasants. So as we walk through this part of the site, you can see what much of it would have once looked like before it was cleared. So a lot of heathland sites were originally, or would have been, conifer plantations. Originally they would have been heathland, but after that they were planted up as conifer plantations. So very tall Scots pine trees here that, when they're too dense, just shade out everything underneath. They've been thinned out a bit here, so there's more ground story vegetation than you would expect otherwise. But once, this site would have been covered by, almost predominantly by these pine trees, and it's the management work that's required by organisations like ARC to clear them and to allow the heath to recover. This way.
Another question, this one for you, Ralph. When do reptiles start to hibernate?
That's a good question. It will vary, so it's thought to be linked to length of day, so the amount of sunlight, rather than directly to the temperature. But most reptiles will be looking to hibernate in around sort of October, November kind of time. Generally speaking, juveniles stay out a bit longer than the adults because they need to feed up more to get through their first winter. So particularly for sanders, for example, we've seen sanders right into November, juveniles that is.
And I mean, you'll get adders basking in January, on warm January days. If the weather's right, you'll get adders basking out then.
Yes, yeah, indeed. Although those adders will have hibernated and will be coming out of hibernation in January. But yeah.
So it's not like they go to sleep in November and don't wake up till March. If their weather's warm enough, they can wake up in the middle as well.
Absolutely. They do show in the feed.
So this is another example of where bracken can just take over a heathland site if you allow it to. Which is one of the reasons we do manage for bracken on our sites, because if you let the bracken take over, then it blocks out all the sunlight down to the heather, so the reptiles have no places to bask.
So a good question here from Pete Sanders. Using herbicide is certainly not the most ecologically friendly way of dealing with bracken, but it is by far the most effective. And in our opinion, so as an organisation, ARC, have decided that it's better to keep our sites in good condition for animals by using herbicide, because that does effectively control the bracken. It does keep the heathland open, than it would be to let the bracken take over and lose the habitat underneath. So scattered bracken is fine. If you sort of look in the foreground here, you can see there's just the odd scattered frond. But if we go further onto the site, and you can see that there's a solid wall of it down at the bottom there. So that's an area that we've got earmarked for management later on. There's very little growing under that there, so it does need to be controlled. And when you manage several thousand hectares of land across as an organisation, we need to be able to manage it in an effective way. And unfortunately, herbicide is the only really effective manner we can do so. So that's why we feel we have to use herbicides. It's also worth pointing out that the chemicals we do use are targeted solely to affect bracken, so it doesn't kill off the heather or anything like that. It just affects the target species. So that's the rationale behind that.
So I said earlier that East Weaversdown is home to 5 out of the 6 native reptile species we have here in the UK. The only one not present here is the smooth snake. But sand lizards, they were present on East Weaversdown historically, but due to habitat loss and fragmentation, the sand lizard was lost from this site. So in order to help the sand lizards and promote their recovery, ARC started a captive breeding and translocation program, and sand lizards were re-released onto East Weaversdown in 1991, and they have done amazingly ever since. The populations are really good here. And actually you can see some of our hatchling sand lizards at the moment. These guys hatched out in July this year and are due for release onto one of our heathland sites in Surrey later on. And by going to the ARC YouTube channel, you can see what they're up to live in their enclosure right now.
So here we are again under the pine trees and amongst the bracken, and you can see that there's really very little else growing apart from pine and bracken. So this is the habitat that we're working to revert back to species rich heathland. There really isn't a lot going on here in terms of biodiversity. You can start seeing once you move out and into the light where the trees have been cleared, you can start to see the difference. And here again we have the heathers all in bloom and re-establishing as they would have once done hundreds of years ago. And I think we'll probably leave it there, folks. With one final question, just saying, yeah, so this is an open access site. It's private land, and there's no official rights of way, but there is public access in it. Public access isn't restricted. It's near to the Deer's Hut pub if you want to find it. Alright. Thank you all very much, guys. We're going to sign off now and enjoy the rest of Secrets of the Heath. Bye.
Bye.